Hello and welcome to what is it? It's week 3, but chapters 5 and 6 of the Deeper Learning book study, virtual, asynchronous, futuristic here in the 21st century. And we are here to talk about the comprehensive high school, performance versus learning. That's chapter 5. And then we'll talk about, it's a really great pairing of these two chapters, this idea of deeper learning at the margins and what's going on in schools where you might not see deeper learning in the classrooms, but maybe you see them in the clubs or in extracurricular activities. So that's the two chapters. And I say that as if that is a good summary, but there are so many things in these chapters. They bring up so many interesting ideas. We are just going to dive in. And this week, we're going to start with Phil's thoughts. Phil, what did you take away from this first chapter, the comprehensive high school?
Yeah, again, I felt like it was a survey course in the comprehensive high school. There was so much there, and obviously the chapters do go together. But one thing that I thought for Real World Academy especially really struck out was this concept of, and it was on the bottom of page 233, that people in the engineering program took the stance that what you know is less important than what you can do with what you know. And I thought, especially for an engineering course, which often is very linear, kind of even cutthroat, either make it or you don't, for them to focus on learning rather than attainment or performance. And that's another theme in the book that throughout, this chapter throughout is the concept of students performing for the adults versus students actually learning. But I love that concept and what we can do with it at Real World Academy about, can we have a rallying cry, and can students be empowered to have a rallying cry that what am I going to do with this? Like, right. If I learn this, well, the important thing here is what I'm doing with what I'm learning, not the breadth. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, it just makes me think of and I think maybe one of the amazing things about this book, but this chapter in particular, is it's looking at what they're considering kind of a maybe above average comprehensive high school. They call it attainment high. They talk about how diverse it is in kind of all of the different things that are happening here. It is kind of incoherent as like it doesn't have one single mission, and there's like spots where things are happening that are kind of interesting, and maybe even there's some deeper learning, which gets into the other chapter. But then there is this idea that the overarching motivation for students to do well or to succeed, even the definition is gain points, get good grades, and then go to college, right? The attainment idea. So there's something that is just, it identifies a lot of assumptions, but then reveals them as being kind of like really problematic, right? The idea of learning as being possibly in tension with performance. I think that's really powerful. And we don't, even when you think of the word perform, right? It's like performing is like sometimes thought of as like, you're acting, you're performing, you're playing a game, which they use this term. And that's the way we talk about school. And that's in fact the way students act in school. It's a game, you just have to get through it. And what you do isn't really applicable to the real world. I don't know. I think that's something I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, I think of the concept of prepping for a test. You're preparing for a performance. Right. And it's 100% lined up with that, rather than demonstrating your learning. The real thing, to me, I saw this as a real validation of why Real World Academy has to be a standalone school, and you can't just carve off. And you and I both had opportunities to work in schools where I think exciting stuff happened, but it was always in tension and always in conflict with the system at large. And I see that here. They talked about some teachers who it's not our job to be creative and to do learning. Our job is to teach what they tell us to teach. And the concept of science labs, they exist to demonstrate existing principles instead of having labs that would be opportunities to investigate the unknown.
Right.
I'm sure someone said, well, how do you measure when they've achieved the unknown? And it doesn't make any sense.
Well, it just reminds me of my own experiences as a physics student, as a science student. And when you're in class, no one is expecting you to do a lab because the teacher actually doesn't know what's going to happen, right? Like that's absurd, right? But in reality, that's what science is. But I do want to actually go back to what you said about this idea that it's possible to make change within systems. On 248, they talk about, well, they really talk for a while about the math department trying to undergo some change. And they have this quote, which I think it's sobering, but it's real. And they say, the math department example shows how significant incremental change can happen within departments in large comprehensive high schools when the circumstances are just right. And it's like, change is possible when the stars align. I think that's a dose of reality, but for Real World Academy, it's also, kind of a point of showing that it is possible, right? Because like within the district, the stars are in some sense aligning for a new school to be built. The money is there, the school is happening, right? So like it can happen within a system. You do have to have committed people to really think differently. And before this, I know we were talking about like, the idea that there is this grammar of schooling, there's a grammar of instruction that the teachers are going to have to kind of work themselves out of utilizing some of these ideas in the ways they talk about performance and assessment, and define collectively what they want the new standards to be.
Yeah, I think I view it as, I agree with you that, and I experienced a school that for 3 years was an amazing project-based school. And then the principal moved on, some teachers moved on, and the system ate it back up. And I think it will always revert to the mean, like water, the easiest course. So I think Real World Academy's strength is redefining those systems so that they serve their purpose rather than the schooling serves the purpose of the system, which I think there's a million examples here that we can talk about. And a couple things I think that are important for Real World Academy, in that when you were on 248, the part that I found interesting was the definition of for the teachers, trying to figure out what productive struggling looked like versus floundering. And I just pictured that first year at Real World Academy, that's going to have to be a question on every teacher's tip of their tongue. Is this productive struggling?
Right.
If so, let it go. Is this floundering? If so, we need to intervene and redirect. The other takeaway from this chapter for Real World Academy to me was on the top of 240, and I think you had it highlighted also, where regardless of the schools that the reviewers had looked at, each of the institutions had begun with a granular vision of good instruction. They then developed robust mechanisms for adult learning, made collectively visible what students were doing in learning, treated adults the way they hoped adults would treat students, the symmetry piece, built a collective identity around their shared vision of instruction, and organized all aspects of their structures to support that vision. And in fact, I feel that this is probably as close to a guidebook as we might get for how to organize the work this year around curriculum development with the teachers, training, curriculum development.
Yeah, curriculum development, but then also personal development, right?
Exactly.
It says at the bottom of the same page that, there are these silos in disciplines and they get recreated and replicated with the students, right? So if the teachers act siloed, the students act siloed, but the teachers at Real World Academy have a full year head start to start becoming a cohesive team. And then really understanding like that is an important thing. That might be, to use some of the terms, the term that you brought up before, the hidden curriculum, right? They talk about this in the chapter, the hidden curriculum of Real World Academy. Maybe they're not going to come out every day and say, hey, look, we are a cohesive interdisciplinary team and all the teachers are kind of working together behind the scenes, but that implicitly the students are going to see it. It's going to come out.
Absolutely. And as every teacher knows, you get a little insight into every student's household and their family by getting to know the student. And the same is true. They watch and they absorb and they learn and they replicate. And the teachers make it. And now that you're actually pulling some of my key quotes from the next chapter into this conversation, it probably means we're close to the end of our.
I got mixed up. That's okay.
Anything else you want to add as we close out this chapter?
No, I think we didn't really cover it. There's a ton here, but I think that we've hopefully given everybody a bit to think about, and then they can also refer to our question sheet.
Guiding questions. All right. Thanks. We'll see you in the next chapter.